Welcome to the UFC on ESPN Plus 7, Overeem versus Olynyk dissection. That's a fucking mouthful, isn't it? Before we jump into this main card, though, let's talk about the fights that went down this past weekend where Israel Adesanya was able to defeat Kelvin Gastelum for the interim middleweight title. And one of the best, probably the best interim title fight ever, and maybe one of the best title fights of all time, and period. Really back and forth. They both hurt each other. I felt like Gastelum won the first, Israel won the second and the third, and then I felt like Kelvin came back in the fourth, and then Israel just took over in the fifth. So I had it 3 rounds to Israel, but it was a good fucking fight. Kelvin, I think, surprised a lot of people with his hand speed and just his ability to close distance on Israel, get inside some of those kicks and attacks that were keeping him on the edge. But overall, I felt like Adesanya controlled most of the fight, but it was a great fucking fight. They both hurt each other several times, and I feel like we're going through this kind of, and you saw this in the main event too between Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier, but after all the stuff with Conor and Khabib, there seems to be almost an emphasis on respectfulness between fighters, right? It seems that way, at least. I don't know. I hope it continues. I prefer it. Don't get me wrong. Shit talking's fun and everything. I get that it sells the fights, but it just doesn't feel as authentic, you know? Like, you can't hate everybody. Like, Colby Covington is a villain, right, in his weight class, and he pretends to hate everybody, but there's no way that's real. That's why nobody falls into it. Like, I think people were so attracted to Conor shit-talking because I don't think he was personally attached to he was just trying to get inside their heads, right? It's like Colby's almost trying to manifest this personality, and it doesn't really work. But it works in the sense that it gets people talking about him and selling fights, and maybe at the end of the day, that's all that fucking matters. But, regardless, great interim title fight between those two, and then Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier put on a fucking show. Showed a ton of heart. I mean, he was hurt in that fight. You could tell there were moments where he was like, oh, fuck, maybe Max is going to start taking over. But, man, everybody's placing this emphasis on how big Dustin looked at 155. And don't get me wrong. I think Max, like, you got to remember, Dustin's been settled into this weight class. I said this on the last podcast. Dustin's been settled in here for a while. This is Max's first go at 155. You know, of course he's going to look a little small. Like, I think he's in flux right now. Like, he doesn't know if he's going to stay at 145 or if he's going to go up to 155. So it makes sense that his weight is fluctuating a little bit. You know, he's not going to be built like every other. The muscle density is not all going to be there like it is for every other 155er who has like a routine and a strict nutrition program, and that's when they fucking cut the weight. So that didn't surprise me so much, but to me, the difference was just like there are moments when Max will step off and he'll create an angle and he'll start attacking you, and then that's when he pours it on when he finds those openings. And Dustin was just making him pay when he came in for big. Like, Max could never. First off, there was a good point that was made by like DC and Rogan and everybody commentating that Dustin was hurting Max with the shots more than Max was hurting Dustin. But there were moments where I felt like Max clipped Dustin, and you know, Dustin rebounded, put his foot back on the gas, and just made it a fucking dogfight. And he looked brilliant. His boxing was on point. And like I said, he was making Max pay when he was coming in. Like, there are moments in a fight when Max normally starts taking over and, you know, really pouring it on guys. And Dustin never let that fucking happen. I don't think it might have had something to do with the strength, but Poirier was just landing a lot of fucking shots in general, regardless of whether they had pop or not, and they were stopping Max from coming in and applying the pressure that he's used to putting on people. I thought Dustin looked fucking great. He looked like a world champion, and if he doesn't get the title shot against Khabib after a performance like that, against who everybody was talking about before he moved up to this weight class as one of the pound-for-pound greats, something is fucking wrong. I mean, Dustin Poirier is an animal. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's been working on his wrestling. He just beat the best featherweight of all time, and a guy who everybody felt like should have moved up to 155. Like, he would look better there. And I still don't think that weight class is out of the realm of possibility for Max Holloway. I think if he throws on, like, if he decides he wants to move up there, it'll be an easier cut for him, and then he can start throwing on a little bit of muscle. He'll look better there. He'll have a little more pop on his punches, but I didn't necessarily think that was the biggest thing. Like, yes, he was stinging him, but he was stinging him because of his technique and the openings that Max was giving him. And to me, it was just a night where Dustin Poirier capitalized on opportunity. He looked fucking fantastic, and I don't know that he's getting. I don't know. He's obviously getting credit, and he looked great, but I just don't feel like. I feel like hindsight's 2020, right? Of course, everybody's going to say Max didn't look as good. And I mean, Max has never been the kind of guy with a ton of pop to his punches anyway, though. He's a volume guy. He has to put it on you, and he could just never put enough volume on Dustin Poirier to put him away, in my opinion. Great fight, both guys, respectful the whole entire way through. Dustin Poirier's got this great cause called the Good Fight Foundation. Max donated his gloves to it. They sell off fight kits and auction them off for charity. Dustin Poirier is just one of those guys who it feels good to see him win a title. He's a guy who deserves to win a title. He's been through a lot in his career. He's been with the UFC for a long fucking time. He's been fighting the top names in the sport at 145 and 155 for the duration of his career. I mean, goddamn, Dustin Poirier is a fucking problem. And, you know, I understand that on paper people are probably just thinking Khabib's going to take him down and maul him. But Khabib, in order for him to complete his takedowns, has to apply pressure. And what Dustin Poirier exemplified to me in that fight was the ability to deal with pressure. I always say if someone's pressuring you, you have to make them pay for it. Dustin Poirier has the ability to make Khabib pay for the pressure. I'm not saying he's going to be a favorite. I'm not saying it's an easy task to overcome for him by any means, but he does throw volume, and he does have it in him to go 5 rounds with Max Holloway, who has an endless gas tank. You know? So it's going to be interesting. That's a fucking deep weight class.